Dude, you'll never believe this. I just had the weirdest thing happen. What? What happened? I was playing this game, right? And I was like having fun? Like I felt joy. You felt joy? Playing a game? What kind of game was this? You see, that's the weirdest part. It's like Magic the Gathering, but I didn't hate myself when I was playing it. What? Are you sure you're playing the right kind of game? How is it like Magic if you don't hate yourself? I don't know, guy, but it was amazing. You should check it out. I think I will. Well, that's great, because that's what this video's about. Let's talk Legends of Runeterra. Legends of Runeterra is another collectible card game. Another one. I'm sure you've seen plenty of these come and go, but I think where Legends of Runeterra really shines, whereas others such as Magic the Gathering Arena does not, is that it is extremely friendly to free-to-play players. Unlike other collectible card games, this game is giving you lots of cards, lots of wild cards, all the things you could possibly want as you're playing the game for free. So with extremely minimal or no investment whatsoever, you too can be playing lots of really cool decks very quickly in this game. And on top of that, the game rewards you for your time input, and it makes you feel good as you do it. As you're making progression in this game, the amount of endorphins it shoots into your veins feels nothing short of digital heroin. It is amazing. Another key difference between Legends of Runeterra and Magic the Gathering is that the mana system is incredibly different. In Magic the Gathering, you need to play lands to get mana. In Runeterra, you just get them every turn. Every turn you get one extra mana to use, so the first turn you get one, the second turn you get two, etc, etc. On top of this, we also have a spell mana reserve. So you'll notice these three little dots over here. This represents your spell reserve. The way you build up your spell reserve is by not spending your mana. So up to a maximum of 3 unspent mana will get banked to be used for spells. Spells in this game are literally spells, not creatures, they are spells. So the spells that you cast can be pulled from the spell mana as well as your primary mana. So another interesting bit of strategy over Magic the Gathering, unspent mana is not completely wasted per turn, you do get to bank some for future spell use. Another key difference between Legends of Runeterra and Magic is the way that turns work. In Legends of Runeterra they're called rounds, but whatever, they're turns. But you're in either an attack or a defense state. So when it's an attack state, you can immediately throw your creatures onto the board and attack, and then that does not end your turn. You still get to cast creatures as much as you'd like. Your opponent, however, can also cast creatures, even though it is your attack round. The difference in this game versus Magic is that turns basically just highlight who is able to attack. That is it. So you're still able to play all the cards that you'd like. The key difference is that the person with attack gets to decide to attack first before the opponent can play anything. They can only react with spells or block with the creatures they have. But if you decide to play a creature, they can decide to play a creature. So you now have this strategic opportunity to attack with what's on the board and the opponent can only block with what's on the board. Or you can decide to add to your board, but then you have to accept that your opponent can add to their board. This dynamic creates an opportunity for both players to not be caught off guard just because they didn't happen to have the mana, but it also creates strategies where you might want to fill your board on your defense turn, so on your attack you can swing in with everything that you played, while your opponent has very little on their board per se. That's a quick way to get in a lot of damage, and then you get to play a bunch of other stuff if you'd like. These kinds of strategic elements makes Legends of Runeterra a very dynamic and strategic game. Beyond just all of the deck building and comboing that you can do with the cards themselves, the way that you play the game is also pretty different than Magic the Gathering. Another cool thing is that creatures actually maintain the damage that they've taken between turns. So if you've hurt somebody for 1 damage and they were a 2/2 for instance, they are now going to be a 2/1 throughout the rest of the game. Sure, they can be healed by other spells and you can do other things to get it back, but in general, when you hurt somebody, they stay hurt. This allows for trading of creatures during combat to be a lot more efficient. Just blocking something does yield value even if you lose your creature. They won't heal to full at the end. Another very cool and interesting difference between Magic and Runeterra. You know what else is really freaking cool? Champions. Champions are special creatures using Magic parlance. that have their own unique enter the battlefield effects or do cool things during battle or just create bad situations for your opponent. They all have something interesting about them, but they also have a leveled up state. And in order to level them up, they all have their own unique conditions in order to do so. So some might be drawing a bunch of cards, some might be casting barrier on a bunch of allies. They all have a bunch of different things that it takes to level them up. And you should be thinking of champions as the North Star for when you're deck building. When you're deck building, if you're not building a deck that synergizes with the champion that you're putting in the deck, you are likely not building a very good deck. So look at what your champion does, look what their level up condition is, and use that as a guide to figure out what you want to include in your deck. They should synergize with the champions you are including. If you've played Magic the Gathering, then you're very familiar with the idea that the colors of mana have generally a certain play style that they cater towards. Runeterra has the same exact concept, only it's with regions. There is no unique mana per these regions, they all use the same mana base, so regardless of how you build your deck, you don't have to have any weird mana considerations, but you do have deck building considerations. Once you've decided which 2 regions you want to build your deck with, those are the 2 regions cards that you can only use in your deck. So if I add in 2 different regions into a deck, you'll notice it grays out everything else. It's saying you have to use those 2 regions now. So you're always limited to 2 regions max, and from there, once you've made your champion selections, you can kind of figure out what cards you think are going to work best with them, and each region has multiple champions within them, so you don't have to worry about being extremely limited, that if it forces you to only use certain cards, you only can use certain decks. Not at all the case. There's many different champions, many different cards within each region, so deck building is extremely fun in this game as well. But you do need to be aware that the regions all have a specific play style that they cater towards, and certain synergies that are naturally built within each of them. The last thing I'll cover here are the different spell types. There are burst spells, there's fast spells, and there's slow spells. A lot of people like to pretend that fast spells are like instants and slow spells are like sorceries. That is kind of true, but let's go over what these actually are. So a burst spell is a very unique condition that has no equivalent in Magic the Gathering, which is they cannot be responded to. That doesn't mean that the opponent can't do anything after the fact. All a burst spell says is that it guarantees whatever it says on the spell card is going to happen. Whatever the opponent decides to do after that is on them, but a burst spell is something that can just happen, and that's it. The difference between a burst and a fast is that a fast spell very much emulates the Magic the Gathering stack situation with instants. So if you play a fast spell, your opponent can then respond with their own fast spell, and then another fast spell can be played, and there's basically a resolving of the stack of spells exactly like it does in Magic the Gathering. Alternatively, there's slow spells. A lot of people like to call these sorcery equivalents, which I really don't agree with, because sorceries in Magic the Gathering, as you know, can only be cast on your turn. These spells can be cast on either person's turn. The difference is that they just can't be cast while combat is going on. So if your opponent initiates combat or you initiate combat, all of your slow spells will do nothing. You can cast them all you want after combat, but during combat, they will do nothing for you. That is the major difference with spells here. So always keep in mind how these different spells interact. Just remember that if it's a burst spell, it's going to happen no matter what. If it's a fast spell, your opponent can put something else on the stack and potentially react before your spell resolves. And if it's a slow spell, please make sure you cast it before you start combat, or have some reason to cast it after. So yeah, that's how you play Runeterra. That doesn't sound too bad. It sounds kind of cool. It is pretty cool. You should definitely give it a shot. I'm gonna give it a shot. Well, that's good. And I hope you give it a shot too. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. Otherwise, I still love you guys regardless. Feel free to do all the YouTube stuff below if you so desire, and I will catch you in a future video. Love you guys. Mwah.